Hello and welcome back. So, as we have secondary effects of the coronavirus lockdown, there are quite a few which are of interest, which I think would be entertaining as well. So, the obvious one, firstly, is reduced cars, leading to reduced crashes, of course, but people are taking the opportunity for speeding, and therefore the crashes that do happen are a lot more dangerous. Also, the Club for Carers idea. People are very concerned about how many people have been gathering together in groups in order to show their support, especially when gathering outside hospitals of all places, and some have been fined. But my personal favourite is the most recent story from the BBC, which is Coronavirus Doctor's Diary, Take Care When You Clap for Carers. Because people go outside because they've been still all day, and they hurt themselves because they've walked outside. And then they need to go to hospital, putting unnecessary strain on the NHS. It's brilliant. It's fantastic of how he's basically saying, it's like, yeah, I know you're trying, but dear God, please stop. We can't trust you with anything. So, loads to look forward to. So yes, first of all, cities are starting to report big declines in car crashes, but increases in speeding. This is from April 16th because it has most depth, but we have seen the trend to continue. So we've got some people saying that in New York, that it sounds like a NASCAR race is happening on the highway right now, as they say in New York City, for example, estimated vehicle miles travelled were down between 78 and 92% from January volumes, according to Streetlight, a mobility data company. In Denver, driving is down 75%, Houston 66%, Miami 72%, Chicago 68%. Several major auto insurance providers have offered discounts to their customers to reflect the reduced risk, with premiums cut by as much as 20%. Wow, you would have thought they'd be loving it because they'd be raking in more money, but no, actually, that the competition has allowed people to get the service for cheaper. How lovely. How delightful. So, they say that the American epicenter of the pandemic being New York, the number of speeding tickets triggered by city cameras in school zones went up by 57% in the first 10 weekdays after New York State implemented its pause order on 22nd of March. Went up by half. You've got somewhere between 22 and 8% traffic, and yet 57% more speeding tickets. It's amazing. Between 2nd of March and 9th of April, 6 motorcyclists and drivers died on New York City streets and highways, a figure that matches the highest count for those dates since the city's Vision Zero initiative began in 2015. At the same time, car collisions were down 54% between 8th of March and 5th of April, according to the NYPD. Meaning that a likely reason for the increase in motorist deaths during this year's coronavirus crisis is simply that drivers are travelling at excessive speeds, which make car crashes more likely to be fatal. Of course, that they're just not making the corner. And yes, I understand that speed limits were put in place essentially in the 70s for cars of the 70s and of course before, which will be up to the MOT standard of course, but they're not going to be fantastic cars, and they're not going to have the same safety and requirements that we do now, of course. And it's also got to be for every single driver who is eligible to drive, and of course, seeing as you will get your driving test probably in your teens or early 20s, and then you will keep that for several decades, and something important has to happen in order for your driving license to need to be renewed or be revoked. Therefore, your driving may deteriorate because you get older, you slow down, whatever it might be, and you might be in a crappy car as well, and therefore the speed limits and the road requirements have to reflect this, and therefore it has to be safe enough for even the worst drivers in the worst cars to be able to be safe, or safe enough. I understand that. However, when you get to an example here that says in one case a driver was recorded going 134 miles per hour in a 40 mile per hour zone, you begin to think, maybe people are pushing it a bit much. Maybe if you're trying to go down a tight bend, which is normally a 20 limit at 70, then you might be ending up in somebody's garden. And it is those kind of things which is lovely if you can do it, but the speed limits are there, at least in part, for safety. They're the same as the safety cameras, which are not speed cameras if you can see them, but they're speed cameras if you can't see them. That's a small delineation there. So they say all enforcement zones have seen a rise in driving speeds. This includes 20 mile an hour zones where many key workers are walking or cycling. Such driving behaviour is totally unacceptable, and speeding increases the risk of a serious collision, which will further impact on the NHS, fire and police services, abstracting them from working on COVID-19 related issues and potentially depriving patients of access to intensive care facilities and medical care. And that is what we've seen, just with the wider impacts of coronavirus, that when it is compared to previous influenza seasons that we've seen. They've seen millions of people have been deferred because you've got the elective surgery, and therefore this is of course much more serious. That they mentioned here between April and June 2017, a total of 1.7 million patients were admitted for 2.5 million elective procedures, both urgent and non-urgent, across England. In addition, 1.2 million patients were admitted to NHS hospitals, a total of 1.5 million times for emergency unplanned reasons over the same period. And while these latter numbers may fall this year through reduced attendances at A&E, a large number of emergency cases will still need to be treated. And, of course, they're being deferred, which is very unfortunate for people who might have something that is treatable but then becomes inoperable. Something malignant becomes inoperable because they've waited too long, as is often the case with so-called price controls. It's sure, but it's not a cost control, and that is what matters. And therefore, people can't get the treatment they need and end up dying, and therefore we're seeing COVID-unrelated deaths increasing as well because people can't get the help that they need because too much is being focused on one thing. It's just another reflection of planned economies never working. Centralized government doesn't work. You do need a level of decentralized command so that people can understand what they're dealing with in their own district, and also leading up and down the chain of command so that people who are on the ground, on the ground floor in one area can then report back up and say, hey, here's what I'm facing, here's what the situation is, please listen to me because I'm facing this on a daily basis, I know exactly what is happening, and it is important that you take this into consideration when other people in other areas tell you what's happening, so that you can move things about accordingly, instead of just suggesting this is going to work for everyone, because it isn't. It never is. There are far too many differences between people, between groups, and even within groups. So, with that in mind, with cars, social distancing doesn't matter when you're virtue signaling, or does it? Well, apparently they've actually said it does. As they say, this is from a few weeks ago as well, April 18, 2020, and that's why we've seen a slight reduction in it, but unfortunately it does still like to happen because the point of virtue signaling is essentially, it goes back to the old Christian doctrine of praying in private instead of praying in public. It's the same thing here, that people aren't doing something to do good, they're doing something to look good. Big difference. Huge difference. So concerns have been raised after dozens of people grouped together outside a Black Country hospital during the weekly Clap for Carers event. NHS staff and members of the public were filmed gathering outside a Russell Hall hospital in Dudley on Thursday night. And there was the whole Clap for Carers, as they see. One video of the celebration, which was deleted and then reposted by Sam Jones, was viewed more than 48,000 times in 20 hours and led to numerous people raising concerns. And although we're not seeing that so much, of course, we are seeing the dancing videos on TikTok, among other things, showing that not only are they not taking it seriously, they don't really care, they seem to lack a lot of respect, and they also don't care for social distancing. They can be very close without wearing the protective gear, which seems rather odd. Of course, we get that on top of leaked audio from press conference briefings as well, saying, you don't need to worry about it, it's not fatal at all, and it just seems to be more fear-mongering. But when it is so blatant that the social distancing isn't being put in place, that really goes against the ethos of British law, which is that it's one rule for everybody, even the king. I mean, back to Robin Hood days, if you will, that it's the same rule for everybody, even the king. They create something, a law, that they know they will have to follow as well. It isn't one law for you and another for me, one for thee, one for me. That isn't how British law works. It is equality under the law. So when it's a blatant display of disregard for the law because they're thinking that they are above it, that does not sit well in the British conscience, and that is why people are so angry and appalled at it. So, of course, the police have had to step up, and the government has had to as well. That they're saying that the government has said that they urge people, you must stay 2 meters apart and avoid large and small gatherings. And they did actually hand out fines. They did. They fined people who were clapping the NHS because they were breaking the social distancing rules, which obviously wasn't so well received, considering police have been taking part in it as well, and of course they're not being fined. So, although they say that there were officers around there, they say officers did not attend Russell Hall Hospital last night specifically to join the applause. They were patrolling around the hospital, which is a key location for police presence during this national health crisis, and took a moment to pause to show their appreciation. How convenient. We take social distancing very seriously and are working hard across our communities to engage with people to explain and encourage adherence with our restrictions. Even though, as we see here from the Met Police, obviously they don't, and we've seen videos of them on the bridges as well, all grouping together in order to share the love and going, well, hang on, how come we can be out sailing far away from everyone, you'll then bring in lifeguards in order to detain us and arrest us, or we can be in a park in the middle of nowhere. hundreds of meters from anybody. And yet we're still in the wrong. But when we're all gathered really close together, because it is for a cause that you believe in, then it's okay. It's that double standard that doesn't fit well whatsoever. But on top of that, even if people are doing it themselves, let's end on a funny one. The Doctor's Diary, take care when you clap for carers. Say the Thursday evening celebration of NHS workers causes a spike in arrivals at A&E. Dr. John Wright of Bradford Royal Infirmary writes in his regular diary, and below he tells the story of one of those workers, a nurse who suffered badly from the virus but has been discharged just in time for her son's first birthday. And that's nice. She says that she's still suffering and it's difficult to get up the stairs and she's out of breath, and also didn't enjoy the ventilators, and some people are saying it's so uncomfortable, I would rather die than have to wear a ventilator. That is how bad it is. It feels very claustrophobic for them. And on top of that, you might know the story that an American manufacturer of snorkel masks have actually been able to transfer it over to be used for the ventilators because they are far more comfortable and ergonomic, because of course they want to sell a product to people who don't have to use them because it's a snorkel, instead of people who would ordinarily develop the ventilator mask because they go, well, it has to be effective, don't care if it's uncomfortable, it's life-saving, you're going to deal with it. Whereas of course the snorkeling guy's like, well, we want you to choose ours instead of somebody else's, and we want you to go snorkeling because then you'll buy our equipment, so yeah please. Or it could be scuba diving masks, I believe. Sorry, they're not biting them, are they? So he's saying, when people have gone out to clap, we've seen interesting little peaks in accident rates that we weren't expecting. People might need to be a bit more cautious. Sorry. Especially if they've been sitting down all day and then get up to clap. It might be one of the only times older people come outside, and so there's a risk of falling, and I just remind people to take care. The Club for Carers has made us a little busier, says Richard Pilling, consultant orthopaedic surgeon at Harrogate District Hospital. It's very nice that everyone is very enthusiastic about showing support, but it's escalated, so people are coming out banging pans and seeing who can clap the loudest, and there an accidents lie. It's just human nature to be competitive. What can I say? If we're not allowed to work, we're gonna clap harder. It's nice to walk onto your doorstep and show appreciation. It's a chance to see your neighbours, and it's lovely to see people sticking together during the lockdown. Just do it less vigorously. You don't have to be the loudest on the street. Oh, this is just another great example of just virtue signaling and vision of the United kind of thing. People thinking, I'm doing a really good thing and I'm showing everybody how amazing I am. It's like, yeah, and what are the real world effects? Oh, it's fucking it up. You're making it worse. You're thinking you're helping, but you don't understand consequences, and therefore you're making it worse for everybody. So here's a great example of just an idiot. I mean, really. Ella Simkin, maybe idiot is harsh, a clumsy lady, let's go with that. Ella Simkin, 23, went out with her parents to clap on Thursday, and she's not an old lady, she's 23, at their house in South London, and decided to jump up onto a raised concrete flower bed to get a better view of all the neighbours. And this is female athleticism at its finest. She missed her footing, and suddenly there was this sharp pain, she says. It sliced into my knee. I was wearing jeans and at first I didn't realise, but it was bleeding a lot and we went to A&E. I was very embarrassed when we got there. When I went for the x-ray, I was telling them I was out clapping when it happened. Everyone found it very funny, and lots of people said my heart was in the right place. Oh god, it's those flower pots. Richard points out that some people have been exercising more than usual during the lockdown. Yeah, count me in. Good stuff. But others have stopped exercising, and problems can occur when they suddenly get up and clap. They may fall and break a bone, for example. I mean, surely this is also a great example of trying to suggest that people staying inside is supposed to be good for them. I mean, we've been told that we should be exercising more for a long time, and also sunlight is very good and is actually one of the best disinfectants for killing the virus, as Hong Kong are using in their airports, funnily enough. But yeah, apparently now we're saying stay at home. Maybe Dan Erickson and Masihi had a point about saying that we shouldn't be staying at home. They say some people arrive at hospital immediately after the clap, others later in the evening after trying and failing to get over their injury at home. When you're trying to keep pressure off the NHS, it's adding to the workload at a time when we really want to avoid that happening, Richard says. I think people need to be careful and just slow down a bit if they're going out into the street. Oh, that's dreadful. That we've come to a point at which people need to slow down a bit if they're trying to just walk outside. In that case, yes, I think there was a huge problem of telling people to be sedentary and stay inside. How the hell are you expecting people to be able to get back to work and be anywhere near as productive as they were before if they can't even get to the door? At that point, I think that the cure might be worse than the problem, and thankfully, this is said in a way of which the BBC can openly admit to talking about, because they probably don't realise the full implications or the consequences of their actions, as is always the case. So, anyway, that's it for now. I thought we'd end on a funny one of just how ridiculous it is, and just how short-sighted any government advice seems to be. And if it's advice, then that's fine, but if it's legislation and requirements and regulation, then it's a huge problem. Because you're not allowing people to take responsibility and do things themselves, you're telling them to stay inside, and it is causing them to break down. I mean, human bodies are the movement. That's why we have muscles, some more than others. We need to move, we need to be active, we need to be outside in order to get the vitamin D. It's very straightforward. But hey, I hope you're all exercising. Until next time, have a good one.